Even with all the returning production on Missouri's offense, Brady Cook has something this season that he did not have in 2023. Let's talk about it and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the maker of Missouri Mirth here on the Locked On Mizzou podcast 5 days a week. Yes, we are your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, going to talk about the Missouri running back situation that I'm starting to think may actually look a little different for the first time ever under Eli Drinkwitz. Before we start the show, I want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all day long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I really believe that of all the talk about Missouri's offense, and I've been among this, of course, the big obvious reason on paper to be bullish on the Missouri offense this season, well, Missouri was good on offense last season, and they have a bunch of returning production, of course, including their starting quarterback, Brady Cook. And yesterday at SEC Media Days, of course, Cook was a part of those festivities down in Dallas, and I thought some of Cook's comments about the Kansas State game were pretty revealing. Cook talked about how that game, he admitted that these were his words, quote, a must-win game last season. Everybody, as much as the Tigers, of course, talk about, hey, we're just focused on Murray State in week 1, for example. Even Cook had to admit he knew that was a big time game for Missouri. Of course, after the Tigers were pummeled by the Wildcats in 2022, Cook tore his labrum in that game. And basically, of course, in the 2023 game that the Tigers ended up winning on the famous Harrison Mevis SEC record-setting field goal, Cook just basically talked about how his own confidence and the confidence of the team in general really took off. And also remember, this is not something that Cook mentioned, but this is something that I absolutely remembered after the Kansas State game. Basically, it was Cook in a very vulnerable and honest moment saying, I think everybody in this locker room believes in me as a quarterback. It would be nice if more of the fans believed in me too, that type of thing. So basically admitting that, the outside noise does affect him a little bit. So he was asked down in Dallas about the biggest difference entering year 3 as a starting quarterback for Missouri. And he said, quote, I think confidence is right. I've played a lot of football now. At this point in my career, I'm not clawing for a starting position this year going into camp. I think chemistry-wise with the offense, receivers, the line, the new running backs, I think it's right where I need to be. And I think the experience and confidence is going to take me quite a way this year. And honestly, I think this is really the secret weapon of the Missouri offense for this coming year. Not only, of course, the experience and confidence of everybody else on the roster as well. Of course, Marquise Johnson and Luther Bird and Theo Weiss and the offensive line and everybody else who was here last season is going to have that as well. But I think at the quarterback position in particular, when you had a guy who very human, understandably, in a very human moment there, admitted that he wasn't filled with all the confidence in the world, or at least as much as he is now. Now, frankly, I was always impressed with Brady Cook even before last season, just from afar. I thought he was a quietly confident young man, but even the strongest and most confident among us can't help but be affected by other people's opinions, especially in this modern world of social media and all that good stuff. So here's the good news, in my opinion. If you're Brady Cook, you really don't have to worry about messing up anymore, because even as good as Brady was last season, of course, it wasn't all perfect, and yet obviously Missouri did quite well last season, and Brady Cook is a beloved young man and figure now on the Missouri campus. He's the big man on campus, as the old cliche goes. So to me, I just think the fact that Cook is now, not only is he's confident, he's more experienced, he seems like basically the same guy, though, too. It's not as though he's become some, celebrity diva quarterback or something who's, broken up with his girlfriend and is all of a sudden in a love triangle with Angel Reese and Sophie Cunningham or something like that. No, Brady Cook seems like the same down-to-earth guy. And by the way, quietly confident guy that we all enjoyed. It's just got to be nice. Again, like he said after that Kansas State game last year, it's got to be nice to have basically all of Missouri Nation behind him, as opposed to the previous offseason where it was really night and day. Just tons of questions about where Cook could lead this Missouri offense. I think we can all agree that now this Missouri offense and team with Cook as a starting quarterback has the potential to go a heck of a long way once again. But of course, even with all that said, there are always going to be some naysayers out there in the universe, and Ryan on YouTube commented that it would be good to use an episode putting some cold water on the expectations of the offense next year. As the year drove on, they were quite dependent on the run game and short passes, more than likely due to defenses having tape in what they were doing. Cook wasn't doing any tight throws. Burden was held back for the most part, got most of his yards in the first 6 games. Well, as to that last comment, just statistically speaking, it's impossible to argue that Burden got most of his yards in those first 6 ball games for sure. But as to the idea that he wasn't a productive player down the stretch, well, I would challenge that quite a bit, and especially the Missouri offense in general. Really, you go back and look at the 2023 schedule, which game, especially considering the level of competition. Now, yes, the level of competition in the back half of the season, the defenses that Missouri played definitely got better. You have to factor that in. Tennessee, Georgia, and of course, Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. To me, the Cotton Bowl was really the only game where Missouri's offense got off track for the bulk of that game and was really stuck in the mud. Otherwise, sure, you could nitpick here and there, but to me, the idea that, well, Missouri got more dependent on the run game as the season went along, I would say with good reason, because from my eyes, the Missouri running game got better as the season went along. So that was actually a good thing. That was a feature, not a bug, in this humble podcaster's opinion. So I don't know. I'm just going to have to disagree with the premise there a little bit, though I'm certainly taking it under advisement. And speaking of that Missouri running game, of course, with Cody Schrader off to try his hand at the NFL, well, and possibly the UFL as well. I'll have some news on Cody Schrader being picked in that league as well coming up here later in the show. But also Eli Drinkwitz and Brady Cook in Dallas talked quite a bit about the running backs and gave what I thought were some hints on the future, the near future at the very least, of the position for Missouri. So let's talk about that on the program coming up here in just a little bit. And I love sports, and I love them so much I never want them to stop. But on this Wednesday here, no Major League Baseball, no basketball, no football. What in the world am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go to FanDuel. That's what I'm going to do. All I have to do is open up the FanDuel app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And by the way, if you want to check out the World Series odds for our St. Louis Cardinals and Kansas City Royals, both teams actually an equal 60-1 to win the World Series. gotta be honest, I thought, crazier things have happened. Both teams could make that final wild card spot, and really anything's possible once you get in Major League Baseball. Not encouraging you to make that bet necessarily, but just thought it was interesting that the Cardinals and Royals had equal odds there to win the whole thing. But regardless, this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. For your second listen, how about for some fun, check out Locked On Sooners with John Williams. He's a fellow WWE pro wrestling fan like myself, so you know what? He knows how to troll Missouri fans and get some heat, brother. So if you want to maybe get your blood pressure up a little bit, listen to Locked On Sooners. But you know what? Speaking of the Sooners, Luther Burden, a former Oklahoma commit, by the way. Missouri just keeps stealing them, don't we? But seriously, Burden going really on his own personal Heisman Trophy campaign here, I would say, in Dallas. I enjoyed the fact that he was putting himself over, to borrow another pro wrestling phrase, and basically saying, hey, I think I'm the best player in the country. I think I'm the best receiver in the country. And while it might seem silly, I think this kind of stuff helps his Heisman Trophy campaign. It helps my bold prediction that I think Luther Burden is going to be among the finalists in New York for that award at the end of the season. And again, it may seem silly, but there's a absolute hype and media element to this award. As much as, those of us who are maybe statistically oriented want to really dig into the numbers and the film and everything else, figure out who the actual best player in college is. Well, generally the Heisman Trophy just goes to the quarterback on the best team, right? Or some version of a running back or receiver who just has a monstrous statistical year. Again, usually on a team that is, if not the best team, one of the absolute contenders for sure. So believe it or not, all this stuff going along, Burden hyping himself up a little bit, going on his own personal Heisman campaign, and even being one of the best players in the new college football video game. All of that stuff just helps get his name out there even more. And again, compared to last season, Burden, one of the most talked, compared to Cody Schrader in particular before last season, who ended up finishing, 7th, 8th in the Heisman Trophy voting, I believe. I think 7th, I want to say. Well, Burden, his name is so much more out there in the preseason already, and that's just a big advantage. I'm just telling you. So if Burden can have a big statistical season for the Tigers, they make the college football playoff, hey, I think anything's possible. Might as well try to get your name out there and get as many votes as possible. So again, let's transition to Cody Schrader's replacement, because I thought it was interesting that Eli Drinkwitz, to me, talked about the running back position in more detail than I really thought he would. It wasn't just a coach speak thing of, both guys are doing great, blah, blah, blah. He kind of went into a little bit more detail on what he expects from the position, what he wants. And to me, I'm reading a little bit too far between the lines here, but that tells me that a competition at this point is still probably pretty open, and maybe a committee approach could be possible as well. And you look at what Brady Cook said yesterday. He said, quote, Nate Noel has really stood out as being that lightning fast speed. His hands have really stuck out, and I think he can play a big role in the passing game. So Nate has been awesome. Marcus, being Marcus Carroll, Marcus has been too. Marcus is a bigger back, which could complement really well. He runs it really well. He strides it really well, and I'm excited about both of them. So to me, those comments for Cook are pretty interesting too. In particular, I think we've heard of the thunder and lightning element to Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll, but just the fact that Cook pointed out that Noel, who is the lightning in this equation, Well, the fact that his hands have stuck out to Cook, that's a big deal, especially because I think both guys, obviously 4-year players, this will be their 5th year in college football with so much experience. That's one thing that obviously Drinkwitz has leaned on at the running back position big time during his time at Missouri. Well, I think since both guys basically have an equal amount of experience, and it really does seem like their skills complement each other well, I think this could be the first time you see a closer to a committee approach for Missouri. Now, the closest we've been since then certainly would have been the first season for Eli at Missouri, 2020, when Larry Roundtree definitely got the lion's share of the action, but Tyler Beatty was an important part of the offense as well. You know what? One of my most loyal everydayers, John Berger, said that he thought it was a mistake that Drinkwitz didn't give Beatty more action in 2020. And I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a mistake, but I do agree with the premise, absolutely, that Beatty should have gotten more action in 2020. And because of, again, Beatty was so good out of the backfield as a receiver, I think that would have complemented what we were doing so well. There was a memorable passing touchdown to Tyler Beatty in the LSU game on, I believe, an angle route, Texas route, whatever you want to call that thing, where he took it, made an explosive play into a touchdown. Frankly, I think we probably could have seen more of that in 2020. I do agree with the premise there, but I just think it's maybe a little too far to call it a mistake when Missouri was quite good in the ground game that year. But to John's point there, I think there is a real opportunity for Missouri to use Marcus Carroll to the best of his abilities, keep him as maybe the more of the bruiser back, keep him a little bit more fresh. And by the way, you need that pass catcher occasionally. You need a little bit more of a change of pace in the running game as well. It sounds like Nate Noel should be a nice compliment. So again, both guys going to be 5th-year players. I think this is probably starting to feel more and more like this is the year where Eli Drinkwitz actually goes against his tendencies a little bit at the running back position. And one more quick comment here from YouTube about the Missouri offense. This user says dink and chunk, which is what I referred to as the Missouri offense after week 2, starting with Kansas State. I thought Missouri turned into the dink and chunk offense. In other words, hey, short passing, run the football, and then all of a sudden, big time chunk play over the top with the passing game. Well, this commenter says dink and chunk is good, but I would also like to see more in the intermediate passing game. That could take our offense to the next level. With Marquise Johnson on the field, you can open that intermediate passing game for Weiss and Burden. And you know what? I totally agree with this comment, and I've more or less made some similar comments to that effect in the past, saying that, hey, Brady Cook can take his game to the next level by being better in that intermediate part of the passing game. Not only do I agree that Marquise can open up the intermediate passing game for the other Missouri receivers like Weiss and Burden, and of course Mookie Cooper and Mekhi Miller and others as well, but I really think Brett Norfleet, again, can be a huge part of this Missouri offense, opening up that intermediate part of the passing game in particular. Gabe DeArmond over at Power Mizzou this morning said something in particular. Basically, he said, hey, if Norfleet can have a big season for Missouri, open up that part of the passing game, he thinks Missouri will make the college football playoff. I was kind of jealous of that take, to be honest with you. Great take there by Gabe DeArmond. I definitely agree with the spirit of that thought there. And you know what? Let's talk some more. Boy, it's been a lot about Cody Schrader and the running backs on this episode, hasn't it? Well, some breaking news on Cody Schrader here in the last day or so. He's been drafted. Yes, wasn't drafted in the NFL, but he has been drafted by a team that's definitely of interest to Missouri fans out there. So let's talk about Cody coming up here in just a little bit. So as an undrafted free agent, Well, Cody Schrader was picked up by the San Francisco 49ers. And as we speak here, I believe the Niners are opening up training camp. I know the Kansas City Chiefs are doing the same. So I believe any day now, at the very least, the Niners are going to be opening up camp. So going to be very interesting to see if Schrader, who I believe found as good of a landing spot in the NFL as he realistically could have. The 49ers have a similar run scheme to what Missouri did last season. Really, the last two seasons was Schrader, in my opinion. But in particular, last year, that outside zone heavy Missouri run scheme last year, well, that's all very similar to what Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers like to run. So a good shot there for Schrader in the NFL. And of course, even if he's cut at some point during camp by the Niners, he'll still have a chance, in theory, to catch on with another team. We'll see what happens there. Obviously, any undrafted player has a long road, and the odds are against them to make the league. But, well, we've certainly seen Cody Schrader defy the odds before. But if he doesn't make the NFL, he has a shot maybe with the St. Louis Battlehawks with a high pick, I believe the second overall pick in the draft. The Battlehawks took Cody Schrader from Missouri. And if you're thinking, wait, he's still got a shot at the NFL, well, of course, he still has a shot at the NFL. This is to secure his rights if he doesn't make the league, essentially. And honestly, I think it's a brilliant pick by the Battlehawks. I really do, on a couple of different levels, because number one, he's clearly a good enough player. You know, if he doesn't make the NFL, then the UFL, as it's now called, the former XFL, well, I think that's probably a pretty good level for Cody Schrader. I think he can make some money there for at least a few seasons or so. And then just from a marketing perspective, a team that's done really incredibly well, I would say, just in terms of live attendance to those games at the Dome at America's Center. You know, this is just another reason to not only get out to the ballpark, get out to the Dome if you're local in St. Louis, but if you're from Columbia, now a reason to turn on a Battlehawks game on a random, you know, Sunday afternoon in the spring, whatever it might be. And who knows, maybe you get sucked in because of Schrader being an important part of the team. You buy a Battlehawks, you know, T-shirt, jersey with Schrader, and suddenly you're sucked into the whole Battlehawks universe. I think it's a brilliant business maneuver by the Battlehawks, especially in a world where, let's be honest, spring football, spring pro football has never actually worked in the long term. Maybe it'll be different this time, but hopefully, at the very least, Cody Schrader seems to have an interesting landing spot here if the NFL doesn't work out. Again, not betting against Cody Schrader whatsoever, especially with what is a decent landing spot. The 49ers have shown they're willing to add running backs from, you know, way off the radar to their roster in the past. So, again, Cody, wishing you all the best in the world. Hopefully it works out there. But, hey, if he ends up with the Battlehawks, that'd be pretty fun. Again, smart business move by that St. Louis organization, in my opinion. And by the way, since I was speaking of the Dome at America's Center, formerly the TWA Dome, the Trans World Dome, back in the day, well, that made me think of something here. Kurt Warner, of course, the quarterback of the famous St. Louis Rams offense there, the greatest shows on turf. Well, it just got me thinking. I was doing a little bit of research, of course, the other day on quarterback, wide receiver duos. Just thought some interesting notes to go out on here real quick about the rest of the country. E.J. Warner, son of Kurt Warner, is expected to be the starter at Rice this season after transferring from Temple last season. Also, Brett Gabbert, still around, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, the youngest Gabbert, I do believe, certainly younger brother of Blaine Gabbert, senior at Miami of Ohio this season. He's expected to be their starter once again as well. Jamori Macklin, of course, a former Missouri player and cousin of Jeremy Macklin. Well, he transferred from North Texas last season after being one of the most explosive statistical receivers in the country. Well, he's now at Kentucky this season, by the way, with Brock Vandagriff, who was beaten out last season at Georgia. So the former Georgia quarterback expected to be the starter at Kentucky with Jamori, a.k.a. Jay Macklin. So unfortunately, Tigers won't be seeing Jay this season, Jamori, but just thought that was an interesting note. And finally, by the way, I just thought it was kind of cool that Cole Pennington, the son of Chad Pennington, expected to be the starting quarterback at Marshall this season. Of course, Chad Pennington also was a starter at Marshall back in the day and a longtime starter in the NFL with the New York Jets, I believe the Miami Dolphins as well. So anyway, just some quick notes. Thoughts that you Missouri fans, you Missouri football fans in particular, would be interested in that stuff. If I bored you to death, I do apologize, but hopefully it's good enough that you'll join me for the next episode of Locked On Mizzou. So until Thursday, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.